So I have this wonderful, outrageous title for the message this morning, which is, remember who you are and cast off those limitations. And it came from a quote from Paramahansa Yogananda, which I will read to you. He wrote, "Our little minds are part of the omnipotent mind of God. Our little minds are part of the omnipotent mind of God. Beneath the wave of our consciousness is the infinite ocean of God's consciousness. It is because the wave forgets it is part of the ocean that it becomes isolated from that oceanic power. As a result, our minds have become weakened by our trials and material limitations. The mind has stopped its work. You'll be surprised how much it can do if you cast off the limitations you have put on it." So that is our topic today. How we return to the ocean of possibility, the ocean of awareness of the divine presence that is our life, how we break through the limiting constraints that we put on ourselves and our life and return to freedom. This is the first message in a series on living the eternal way, because that's what we do here in the fall eternally, right? We've been doing it for many, many years. And this is after the book that I wrote, Live the Eternal Way, which is really bringing forth of the ancient wisdom that is Sanatana Dharma, which is that there is a way to live, a higher way to live, a conscious way to live that is in harmony with the laws of the universe, that is in harmony with the spiritual truth of our being. And when we forget about that relationship with the infinite, our lives contract, and it is difficult for us. So when I was writing the book, The Eternal Way, I thought, how can I communicate this deep teaching, this profound teaching, in a way that we could have it, at our fingertips in a moment when we need it. And of course, in the tradition of Vedanta, this philosophy of oneness, one truth, one power, one presence, they have many sayings, many wise sayings, tatamasi, that thou art. That is your nature, that is what you are. I thought, how will I say it to people who are coming to this teaching for the first time? So I put together what I have now been calling the Remembrance Sutras. And so sutra is a aphorism. It's a short, pithy saying that helps to take the mind to something deeper and broader, a whole encyclopedia of truth. So I want to share those Remembrance Sutras with you this morning. Many of you know them. Some of you will be hearing them for the first time. So the first sutra is, it is. That's about as pithy as it gets. It is. That is a capital I for the it. This one reality, one absolute reality, is the source and the substance of all that is. It is all God. There is only God. It exists. That's it. It is. Second sutra is the corollary of that one, meaning it is related to that. So second sutra is, we are it. Cannot separate those two. Because if there is only one reality, only one omnipresent reality that is expressing as all that is, then it is expressing as each and every one of us. We cannot be separate from the source of all life. We cannot be separate from God. But sutra number 3 is we forget. We forget that we are that divine self, that divine reality, and that our life is abundantly supported. So we are like the wave that forgets it is part of the ocean. Without the ocean, there is no wave. There is actually no such thing as a wave independent of the ocean. But we forget. We forget that God is our life. And then we have all kinds of sorrow and trouble and sense of suffering and loss and bewilderment. And it seems that we forget more than once. So why is that? Well, the teachings say that it is because we become identified with the body and the mind. That we start to think and to feel that we are this body-mind vehicle. And we become so identified with that we forget that we are spirit, we are the divine self that occupies the body-mind vehicle. Without that, there is no body-mind vehicle. But we forget because we get attached, we get identified with the body, with the mind, and the extensions of the body-mind vehicle, which is everything in our life, including our car. We identify with that vehicle. You know, I always say you can tell that, right? You can tell that you're identified with your vehicle. Because if you go out into a parking lot, you know, and somebody has rammed a shopping cart into someone's car, you know, you might go by and say, oh, you know. But if it's your car, oh, right? Much different feeling. Because there's more attachment, more identification. So this kind of thing causes us to forget. So the 4th sutra I call the good news, which is that we remember. Yes. We remember the truth of our being. And the teachings of yoga say this is the certain destiny of every person, to remember the truth of what we are, because it is the truth, and ultimately that will be revealed. And it comes to us generally in our life as a call to remember. So I want to share a little bit about that call to remember, to wake up. I think we get a great call at some point in our life, which is the trajectory that takes us on the turn to a spiritual path. To, you know, you may have been raised in a religion, but then there's a point where we turn towards truth. Let me say it that way, that we turn towards spirit. We want to know the spiritual truth, you know, beyond even what religion can teach us. What is the truth of our being? What is the truth of reality? What is this life really? So there's a point in our lives that I would call this great turning. And I would guess that the majority of you have been there. That's what got you here. This time in our life where there's a sense of dissatisfaction that arises. In the spiritual teachings, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, one of them, we find out, what are the things that bring people to the path? And one of the things at the top of the list is suffering. So this suffering may be a profound suffering, some loss or grief that we go through, and we don't know where to turn. But very often it comes as a kind of disquiet or a kind of discomfort in which we feel there must be more to life than this. Or we feel somehow that we're missing something. That was my experience. I felt like I was missing something. I was living my life, but something was missing. I wanted something else, but I didn't know what it was. Paramahansa Yogananda said that something else is God. So I felt something was missing. What was missing was myself, my connection to myself, my connection to my essence. So it felt like I was living on the surface of things rather than at the depth. So at this point, when we're ready to make that turn of remembrance, we start noticing this quality of dissatisfaction, unhappiness, sometimes suffering. And we want to find a remedy. We want to find a way to peace, a way to truth. We start asking big questions like really? Is this life? What am I here to do? What is the truth of my life? How can I find lasting happiness? And we begin to notice that the way that we've been living, the things we've invested in, perhaps they have brought us happiness and joy, but we begin to notice that it doesn't last. And that no sooner do we accomplish one thing, or no sooner do we have one thing, than we want another. And we think, surely there is a way off of this wheel of, wanting, attaining, wanting again. And losing my happiness, losing my peace. And so what is that way? So that's the great turning where we come to the path. We begin to ask those kinds of questions. In the Sanskrit word for that quality of dissatisfaction that comes to us is dukkha. Dukkha. And there isn't an English equivalent of it. It can be suffering, or it can be that sense of pervasive unrest or unhappiness. There's some etymological studies of that word that say it comes from an ancient meaning of in the time when there were carts with wheels, that the axle, the hole of the axle, was not quite perfectly round. And so the cart, it would be a bumpy ride. And so in the same way, without being grounded in the truth of what we are, our life is a bumpy ride. It doesn't mean that we can't function. It doesn't mean that we can't move forward in life. But I think when I think about dukkha, this kind of suffering, in modern terms, I think about that shopping cart where one wheel is wonky, and you get that one and you just try to keep pressing on, right? And you're pushing down the aisle, and then you're looking around. Do other people have carts like this? Can I get a better cart? So it's not that our life doesn't function. It's that it doesn't function optimally. So then the question comes, well, what is that turn that we can make to remembrance, to the fourth sutra, that would have us have a better ride in life? So what do we do? I don't know, somehow, well, I'll tell you at the end of the story here this morning about why I came to this, but I was drawn back to this poem. If you're a lover of poetry, you will know this one well, by Mary Oliver, that is called Wild Geese. So how do we get back, to being connected to the self? She starts off this poem, Wild Geese, by saying, you do not have to be good. Because that's the first place we go, right? We're going to clean up our act. And that's not a bad idea. But according to yoga teachings, the premise is wrong. Why is the premise wrong? Because at the core of our being, we are already good, meaning whole, meaning complete, meaning awake, aware, enlightened, free. We're already that. So the more we try to be good, the worse it gets, and the more annoying we are to our family members. So this is a beautiful poem, the way she starts it off. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. So, what does that mean? To me, of course, the body is intelligent, but it means our ability to be connected to our own being, to be present, to be mindful, to be awake, to be aware. She says, tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Life itself announces our place in the family of things. So I want to say you can trust that call that you feel in your heart, in your soul, to return to yourself, to come back home. Whatever called you here to the center today is connected to that deep call to return to yourself, to return to your freedom, to be aware of this awesome truth of who you are, and to live in accordance with that freedom. Because we have that great turn, that time in life where we come to the spiritual path. But then, as I said, after that, we seem to have many moments of forgetfulness, where we find ourselves once again in some kind of box of suffering, of unhappiness or sorrow or limitation, in which we have forgotten our connection to the truth of our being. So what to do? Well, 3 steps. 1, notice. Notice that suffering, where you feel the boxed inness, the boxed inness of limitation. Somehow you feel like circumstances are running your life. Other people are running your life. Notice that sense of limitation and the sorrow that comes along with it. And see what the struggle, the sorrow is made of. Use your discernment. Look at it straight on, fearlessly. Because you'll find that that contraction is made of a story that the mind is making up. You'll find that. I know, I have looked. So look when you feel that contraction in your life, away from your true self, away from freedom, this time of forgetfulness. Look at what's holding it in place, the story. And the story is made up of our desires. It's made up of our likes and our dislikes and our fears. So then ask yourself, what if I just drop that? Just ask yourself. I mean, you might not think, well, I can't drop that. But just ask yourself, what would it be like if I just dropped that story? If I just dropped that interpretation of this moment in my life? And see if that doesn't bring you back to your unbounded self. See if your exploration look right into the heart of the story that the mind has woven. See if, when you say to yourself, what would it be like if I just dropped that? See where that inquiry takes you. See if it doesn't take you into the boundlessness of your essential self. So when I was in North Carolina, I had a lovely, this was just on the last trip. I was teaching at the Unity Temple there in Raleigh, North Carolina. And the place where I was staying was on a lake. And I had a view from the room I was staying in out to this lake, and could go out in the early morning dawn hours, and I would hear the wild geese. And for a short time I lived on the East Coast many, many years ago, and on a pond also, and I remember the wild geese coming, and how thrilling to hear that call of their migration, you know, and they're coming in, they're landing on the lake, and they're taking off, and they're so beautiful. So I was enjoying the wild geese and, you know, everything they represent, you know, that call to soar, right? And then one afternoon, I went for a walk around the neighborhood, and I didn't see the geese, you know, anywhere. I wondered where they were. And then I came upon them. And Matthew, could you show them where I found them? So I sent this photograph to my husband Amarnath. I said, what's wrong with this picture? So, you know, here you can see the lake and all the freedom, but for some reason the wild geese decided to visit the pool. And I waited a while to see if they used the diving board or not, but I didn't see that. But it was such a curious thing. But being the poet that I am, it reminded me of this lesson that I'm sharing with you today. That sometimes, you know, we fence ourselves in with the limitations of the mind. in the way that we are thinking about ourselves, the way we're thinking about our life, even the way we're thinking about our world. And we have the ability to move into the infinite divine reality, which is the truth of our being. Namaste.